So in this video we are going to learn about how to write a note that you will actually understand in the future. So you can see this is one of the article that was written by Sasha, sorry, whatever the name might be. So she I think she yeah, so she have experience in writing Zettelkasten, and she have told a terrible experience that when she used to write notes and Zettels, her future self was not even able to understand the notes that what they have written. So when you start writing notes in a Zettel, right, you write notes, how you write notes based on current context, right? So your present self might be able to understand, right? They might be in the position to understand this particular note. You might be in position when you are writing in the note, you might be positioned to understand this note. But basically when you understand this note after several years, you have to preserve this note for the eternity. So Zettelkasten is basically you, it's your second mind. So when you write this note, when you preserve this note, make sure to preserve it in such a way that even after eternity, 40 years, 50 years or 70 years, you might be able to read it. So basically you are educating your own self. So your wording must be very simple, right? You are educating your own self, right? So in this you can see in this paragraph that few seconds later, after she reads a note from her past, she had a strong urge to punch herself in the face. It might be because the notes were not clearly understood by her, and she was not able to write such a level of notes that her future might be able to understand through her. So basically there should be a structure of notes, structure on how to write a note, or basically how to write a Zettel. If you are not familiar with Zettel, it was mentioned in the video number 1 that what is a Zettel, and it was also explained in video number 2. So it's Zettel, right? So there are two possible ways. One is to have a definitive structure, to have a definitive Zettel structure. And this particular definitive Zettel structure, in future when you will be able to review your Zettel, you will already know that what does each line of the Zettel represents and how is it being written, and what's the first paragraph about, what's the last paragraph about, and what's the second paragraph about. You must be able to understand the context in which it's being written. And second is to write simple. We'll explain it in the example below. Let's first of all talk about to write simple, and we also need to add so that first line of the Zettel should reveal itself. This means that the first line of Zettel should represent the Zettel itself, that what this Zettel is about. Zettel means, here Zettel means a thought, what this thought is about. So let's now take a look on how to write simple and with explicit form. Right, this is the main basic. First of all, it should be simple. How would it be simple? Use paragraphs. Apart from that, second should be use short sentences. Third would be don't write it as whatever comes into your mind. So basically you are teaching your past, right? Always when you will be reading this particular sentence, whenever you will be reading will be particular Zettel, you will be educating your past. So don't write whatever comes into your mind, but write what actually makes sense related to a general thing. Explicit means what actually it makes sense to the outer world, how it is related to the outer world, and not just what's in the moment. So that when you use paragraph and use short sentences, you yourself will thank your past that this is the best way that you have written a particular thing to get explanation out of your past. So when you write short sentences that are easy to understand, you find it much more peaceful. Second is write in explicit form. Writing in explicit form means simply that there should be a specific pattern of a Zettel, that how it should be written. So there is a book, whole lot of a book around it, that is Thinking in Systems. So in this book, Meadows basically tells, this is the name of the author, Meadows basically tells that we need to think in two ways. One is stock and another is flow. Let's talk about stock and flow. So here, stock is basically a static storage. It can be used to store information, it can be used to store a thought, it can be used to store anything, but basically it's a static storage. It has the elements that you can see, feel, hear, or measure, right? If there is a stock, of course there should be it should be measurable. It's measurable. Another is flow. Flow is basically what goes inside the stock and comes out the other way. You can see it here as well. Material or the information that enters or leaves a stock over a period of time. Stocks change over the time through the action of flow. So these stocks, you can consider them as a building blocks, right? Let me explain through an example. So basically this is how a stock is described. Here something is stored. It can be anything. It can be information, a quantity, object, anything that we can feel, hear, listen. And here is the inflow, that something enters into the stock. Here is outflow, then when something leaves out of the stock. But this particular whole of the system is flow, where information or anything flows in and out. So basically flow is what changes a stock, whether it's inward flow, whether it's outward flow. So this is generally how a Zettel should be structured. Structure of Zettel. So it should have header, general overview. Header simply means what the Zettel is about. General overview is a sentence, a very short and simple sentence that explains whole of the Zettel, whole of the thought that's explained in Zettel. Regulation of inflow simply means that when you first encounter this note from somewhere, it should be related to something that's not yet present in the moment in your mind. So you have to explicitly tell yourself that what this note is about and how the below things mentioned are related to this particular thought. And after that you need to regulate the outflow, that what you have understood from this particular note and how have you related to it yourself. And next would be the effect of the stock. How is it, it's basically your conclusion, that how the system inside you have worked. So here is an example of the general overview or header. It's basically an example of the header, which is the title of the Zettel. So these are some of the examples. Okay, so this is how it should be represented. A bad example would be being and cognition. It isn't related to each other and it doesn't explain what's being and cognition and how it is related. A better example would be no being without cognition. Of course, it looks offensive word. It looks very attractive at the time of being writing, but it's not that simple when you read it after years or even after eternity. A better example would be cognition is the process of constructing being. So when you read this particular sentence, you are able to understand that what this particular Zettel is about. So write such sentences which are easy to understand. Of course, sometimes we feel an urge to write the sentences that look sexier, but don't go into that. Right? What you don't need to do, it's avoid these following mistakes. Don't try to make Zettel look sexy. It's only about you. You are educating yourself. So basically you need to understand that what you need to tell yourself after some years in future, that how this note was written. Make it simple. So we are talking about the mistakes. Don't make it complex. Limit to one thought per Zettel. Basically there's a specific note the note is specifically the first sentence should explain in simple words what the note is about. Also, don't expect yourself to be able to understand a Zettel in future. Just because you have written something now and it's very well understood to you right now as related to the context you are working in, it doesn't mean that your future will also understand it. You need to explain it to yourself. So this is how basically a Zettel should be structured, and this is how to write a note that you will actually understand.